if I knew that the police service was going to be this bad 40 years ago, I would never have joined. I really wouldn't. I just wanted to carry on with this Irish theme. With the surname of Logan, I grew up with Jimmy Logan every Sunday evening on the TV. Now, many of you weren't even born when Jimmy Logan, but I can safely say that it stirred. And so I thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President, to be here. And in approaching the debate in favor of the motion, I do so with a heavy heart. Having served 30 years in the Met, where I worked with some great people who regularly would go beyond the call of duty to serve the needs of the public. But I used to see at the same time something that no one has mentioned: culture. I've experienced 30 years of the police culture. It can be very, very mesmerizing. It can be very, very galvanizing. But it doesn't necessarily mean it serves the needs of the public. I've seen too many times, even before police numbers were trashed by austerity, I saw too many times where the culture seems to dismiss the public. We only need you, or we only call you when we need you. And that's ludicrous. And this was in the 80s when I joined, much less now. And things have gone even worse. For example, of where I've seen policing at its best, my last command was part of the Olympic security policing team that seamlessly policed the very successful 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I saw a light touch of policing. It was like service with a smile. I saw the length and breadth of the country, not just at the sporting events, but the community events. The police culture didn't seem to impact on how they serve the needs of the public. So it can be done. But guess what? I haven't seen it since. And that's a real disappointment. And it really lays heavy on my heart that if my grandchildren, and they've got a few years left before they have to come to a decision around their career, but if the culture of the police continues as it is, and I'll go into a bit more detail about it, I will not encourage my grandchildren to join. And I don't say that lightly. It's because what I have seen through the work I've done with young people, I still work with young people on a regular basis through my charity, Voyage Youth. I set up 23 years ago. We've had thousands of young people. And they always say to me, we are over-policed and underprotected. And these are reasonable young people. Some of you may have heard of a singer called HER. No? Oh, well, you have to get out more. If I can hear her, I mean, gosh. In her record, I Can't Breathe, which was released shortly after the death of George Floyd, or the murder of George Floyd, she has a line in there. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing it. And I'll summarize by saying, when the protectors and the predators wear the same uniform, where the protectors and the predators wear the same uniform. I grew up in the 60s and 70s with the Sus Law. The Sus Law was draconian, at least. That's why they repealed it in 84, where you could be stopped on suspicion you're about to commit an arrestable offense. So that means they could think for us, because they knew we were going to commit an arrestable offense without checking with us, without getting any evidence. That's why we used to call them the thought police. They could read our minds. Do you know how many people got criminalized by the Sus Law? I myself had to change my behavior. My parents, like many other black parents, had to give us the talk. Why would they have to give us the talk if the police were there for us? It's because we didn't want to be arrested on a large scale. So I know when we are serving what that does. And I must admit, when I joined in 83, everyone thought I was crazy. If you want to reduce a Christmas card list by 95%, join the police. But I wanted to go in, because you can't change something from the outside. You've got to be in it to change it. And I knew the culture was bad. But I've got to do this. Some of you might know that they made a film about my first few years in the Met Police and my upbringing. Don't worry, it's still on iPlayer. It's called Red, White and Blue. It's part of the Small Axe series. And it's based on my book. I've got some copies in the back. No, I'm joking. But you will see, if you decide to have a look at it, that you have to have people willing to step out and have those really hard conversations. And I had some hard conversations. It's quite interesting that some of the officers who were highlighted in that film as being real so-and-sos, they really made my life hell. But the same thing, they made the community life hell. And I would challenge them. Why are you speaking about black people like that with the N word and the W word and the P word? It was endemic. It might not be as much now, but they still think about it that way. Look at the WhatsApp groups. I was at Charing Cross Police Station, and I couldn't believe what that WhatsApp group was talking about 15 years later. In the same corridors I used to be a chief inspector. And they're talking about people in such disgusting terms. How is that serving? How can you serve when you have those thoughts? And the culture allows it. Because if you decide to step up, you are seen as a troublemaker, and they will drum you out unless you're as determined as they are. When I joined, I said I'm a black man who happens to be a cop. Because surprise, surprise, I've been retired 10 years, and guess what? I'm still black. But I did not lose my authenticity. I stood up for the rights and wrongs that was in that culture. And that culture's got more toxic. If I knew that the police service was going to be this bad 40 years ago, I would never have joined. I really wouldn't. It saddens me to see the culture. So I'm not just talking about stats here. I'm not going to talk about performance management. I'm talking about relationships. Unfortunately, the culture does not allow and celebrate diversity. The recruitment, retention, progression piece is a case in point. Do you know, since McPherson inquiry set the recruitment, retention, progression figures, the police service has only budged by 0.5% nationally. Why? Because people are going in, but they're not staying. So if that culture cannot be good amongst themselves, how is it going to serve the needs of the public? How do they find out how the culture is? Well, now people like me will set up the Black Police Association and give evidence at the McPherson inquiry to say that the Met Police was institutionally racist and take the heat. And then I'll get investigated. And my 11-year-old son, as was then, hears at the playground that dad's a criminal and he's going to prison. That's what the culture can do, and it wears people down. There's examples even now. Senior superintendent, black female, Robin Williams has just left because that culture wore her down. I worked with Robin. She was my general secretary when I was national president. I know what it takes. I'm just telling you that this is not just about reform, people. This is, they talk about a Royal Commission. They've been talking about a Royal Commission for 60 years. Policing is not fit for purpose because they cannot deal with the culture. What fuels it is key. Invariably, investigative journalists find these things out. Look at the McPherson inquiry, the Lawrence family. The 2 suspects have been arrested. Then they find, and there's 3 still waiting to come to court. Well, more than likely they won't. But they just found out there was a 6th suspect all the time. Go and speak to Baroness Lawrence and ask her, does the police serve the public? Ask her. Ask Stuart Lawrence, Stephen's brother. Does the police serve the public? It is something that we need to get to grips with. Even though I can criticize the police, I criticize it because I actually love the police. But they don't serve as they should until they get to grips with the culture. And no disrespect to Andy, he's a senior cop, he's law-abiding, he's a good leader. And he's done some magnificent things since he's been HMIC. Put this Met into special measures. Should have been done years ago. I commend him for that. But is it going to affect the culture? Yeah. Is it? Till you deal with the culture, identify the culture, it will never serve the public. I remember I heard a unit that was called the Special Demonstration Squad. In my 30 years in the Met, and I was at the strategic level, not because of my rank, but because of my influence and my position in the Black Police Association. I never heard of the SDS. It was an investigative journalist to find out there was this subgroup, specialist culture, that led to investigating the Lawrences and other, Green and Common people, all sorts of people. It's ludicrous. I never heard of it. Surprise, surprise, once it was exposed, they got rid of it. So in closing, I thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. Because having this conversation is not about we don't want police. We want a police that's fit for purpose. We want a police that has the openness and the transparency and the accountability. We want a police that does not gaslight us. I don't mind you saying anything, but don't treat me as a fool by gaslighting me. By saying, well, there's nothing here, all these figures. No, everything's great. Trust and confidence is brilliant. It's the lowest it's been in the black community for decades. And I'll end by this. I happened to meet the commissioner on Saturday, just gone, at a memorial service of Richard Taylor, the father of Damilola Taylor. And we were inviting him to a conference set up by the Alliance for Police Accountability, which I'm one of the founder members. And it's on Saturday. I'd invite some of you to come along if you want to get to East London University. And we said to him, are you coming, sir, or a member of your team? Because we've invited you. And what did he say to me? You're unconstructive. Sorry? Unconstructive? That's not a very constructive thing to say. It's not a very diplomatic thing to say. That summed it up for me. That's why, until you get the leadership to ensure you get the culture change and the checks and balances are in there, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be having this conversation for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I ask you, from the bottom of my heart, for the right reasons, know that this motion is critical. So when you vote, vote with your heart and know how it's done is through culture change. No, nothing less, nothing more. Culture change impacts that police service internally and externally. Thank you, sir.